If you weren't here in our Sunday school hour, it's a joy to have Brother Bruce and his wife Cherie with us today. He is a school teacher, but also a farmer who, instead of raising crops, seeks to invest in raising children, not only in foster care, but also with the camp ministry, wanting to impact young people's lives by giving them the truth of the gospel at an early age and giving them that foundation that they often don't even get at home. So, Brother Bruce, thanks so much for being here. We love you, praying for you. Thanks for blessing us with your ministry.
What a privilege it is to be with you folks. Justin's been coming, it's about your fourth time I think he's come down. And he talks a lot about you, and it's never good. No, wait a minute. I have met, Eric has been down, and Rick came down last year, and it's always a blessing. It was so nice to come up and meet you folks and see the ministry that God is using him in here. And it's been a blessing to me just to be here this weekend. I'm sure my wife would say the same thing. I want us to turn to the book of Judges, and we're going to begin in chapter 13. I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest condensed version of Samson's life story. We'll go through it quickly, but what I want to concentrate mostly on is what I've entitled Practical Lessons that we can learn from Samson. And I hope that if you take notes, you'll write these down as we get to them. So let's get back to Judges chapter 13, and we'll see the context in which this story narrative begins. And that's verse 1. The children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines 40 years. If you're familiar with the book of Judges, this is the common cycle over and over again. The children of Israel would sin, go off into idolatry and intermarriage with the people that of the land of Canaan, and then God would chastise them, bring them into bondage. And then they would cry unto the Lord, and the Lord would show mercy and raise up a deliverer. And it's interesting to me in this passage that the people never cry unto the Lord, but God raises up a deliverer anyways. I think it's one of the few cases where that is the situation. But it said in verse 2, there was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and bare not. Okay, she couldn't have any children. The angel of the Lord appeared unto the woman and said unto her, Behold, now thou art barren and bearest not, but thou shalt conceive and bear a son. Now therefore beware, I pray thee, drink not wine nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing, for lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come on his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. Then the woman came and told her husband, saying, A man of God came unto me, and his countenance was like the countenance of an angel of God. Very terrible. But I asked him not whence he was, neither told me his name. But he said unto me, Behold, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and now drink no wine nor strong drink, neither any unclean thing, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. So Reader's Digest condensed version here is that Israel's in a bad situation. God delivers them into the hand of the Philistines. This mother is barren, doesn't have any children. Angel appears and gives the announcement that they're going to have a child, and he's going to begin to deliver. And that's a key word there. He doesn't actually do it, but he begins the deliverance from the Philistines. And Samson is born. He is going to be a Nazarite. Now, there's a difference between a Nazarite and a Nazarene. A Nazarite had the Nazarite vow, which they could not, from here, drink no wine nor strong drink. Really, they weren't supposed to have anything from the vine, I don't believe. And then it says, any unclean thing. They were not allowed to touch dead animals or touch unclean animals. And they were not to cut their hair. That was a sign, an outward physical sign that they had this vow that they were, and this is the fourth thing, consecrated to God. Their life was, their ministry, their purpose in life was to be consecrated to God for his use. So those four things: no wine, song, drink, no dead animals, no touch on unclean thing, no cut your hair, and you're consecrated to God. And we want to look as we go through in Samson's life how it seems like each one of these things goes by the wayside. All right, Samson's born. Now in chapter 14, he sees a woman, and that's the beginning of the end for him. Samson went down, verse 1, saw a woman in Timnath, came up, told his father, and said, I've seen a woman in Timnath, the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife. I don't know if I'd talk to my dad that way if I'd pick myself up next week. Go get me this woman. No, but that's what he said. And we begin to see that his focus is on the outward appearance of women. We see that several places. His problem is with lust. So quickly go on down to verse 5. Samson went down, and his father and mother to Timnath, came to the vineyards of Timnath, and behold, a young lion roared against him. The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid, or just tore him up. He had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father or his mother what he had done. Interesting that that is mentioned there. He didn't tell his mom and dad that he had. Question, is a lion a clean or unclean animal? You say clean? What was the stipulation for clean animals in the Old Testament? Split hooves, chew the cud. Does a lion have split hooves? Does it chew the cud? No. Unclean animal. Kills it with his bare hands. Okay, it isn't dead yet until he kills it, right? So let's go on. He doesn't tell his mom and dad. Interesting. Kids, why don't you tell your mom and dad things? Well, we'll not go there. There's a lot of things I didn't tell my mom and dad. He went down, talked with a woman, and she pleased Samson well. He goes back, verse 8, after a time he returned to take her. He turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. I don't know why he would do that, just, I killed that lion. See that lion? I killed him, bare hand. But he goes and he looks at it, and behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took thereof in his hands and went on eating. Did he touch an unclean thing? Yes. Yeah, how in the world are you going to get that honey out of there without... Notice what he did, though. It says he did eat. He gave them to his father and mother. He gave them. They did eat, but he told not them that he'd taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. Why didn't he tell his parents what he had done? He broke his vow right here, first thing. Touch not any unclean thing. Verse 10, so his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men to do. A marriage feast with an unsaved woman, a Philistine nonetheless. Do you suspect that there might have been a little wine at this feast, marriage feast? I suspect. It doesn't say it specifically, but as we see Samson's life and his slipping, his dropping of each one of these vows, I suspect that took place here. And he gets involved with a riddle, and it begins a tug of war at this place. He gives them a riddle. They cheat with his wife, get her to tell him, blackmail her basically. And so she tells what the riddle is, and then Samson says, you plowed in my heifer. Interesting choice of words there. But then he kills 30 Philistines to get their clothes. So and that begins a tug of war of, you got me, now I'm going to get you. You got me, now I'm going to get you back. Well, I'm going to get you worse. Revenge over and over again. We're going to see that. Okay, he kills the 30 Philistines, so they came and burned his wife with fire. No, not yet. They give his wife to another person. Well, that's a great deal. So he catches 300 foxes, ties their tails together, lights them on fire, puts them through the standing shocks, burns up all their crops. You get even with me, I'm going to get even with you. So then they burn his wife with fire and his father-in-law. You see that in chapter 15, verse 6. And the Philistines said, "Who's done this?" They answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion." Philistines came up and burnt her and her father with fire. Now I want us to notice, verse 7. Samson said unto them, "Though you have done this, yet will I be," what's the word there? "Avenged of you. And after that I'll cease." You ever said that? I'm just going to get even and then that's going to be done. No, it doesn't work that way, does it? It just starts a cycle. You get even, I'm going to get even with you. So we see that. He kills a whole bunch of people, verse 8. Doesn't say how many. But look at verse 10. The men of Judah said, "Why are you come up unto us?" And they answered, "To bind Samson. Are we come up to do to him as he hath done to us?" Oh, look at there. So look at the end of verse 11. He said unto them, "As they did unto me, so have I done unto them." Oh, this endless cycle of revenge. It just goes on and on. He kills a bunch of people. They take him captive. And then he begins, just kills all these people. What is it, 1,000 people with a jawbone of the donkey? Verse 15. Found a new jawbone of an ass, put forth his hand, took it, slew 1,000 men therewith. I never knew this, but verse 16, Samson said, "With the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, the jaw of an ass, have I slain 1,000 men." A note in my Bible says, there's a play on words in the original. It says, "With the jawbone of an ass, I've made asses of them." So he's just getting even, this constant cycle of revenge and getting even, and you did this, I'm going to get you back, and I'm going to get you better. It doesn't work. Well, we go to chapter 16, and we see the beginning of the end. Samson went to Gaza, saw there a harlot, and went in unto her. Again, his problem with lust. Told the Gazites, saying, "Samson has come hither." They compassed him in, laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city. Were quiet all night, saying, "In the morning when it's day, we'll kill him." Samson lay till midnight, arose at midnight, took the doors of the gates of the city, 2 posts, went away with him, bar and all, put them upon his shoulders, carried them up to the top of a hill that's before Hebron. I think it's like 30 or 40 miles. He carried these gates of the city on his shoulders and put them up there just because he could, okay, to get away from these people. And of course, it's God's preservation for him of this. But interesting, even while he's with a harlot, God is still watching over him. And now in verse 4, it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman. Now here's another one. The word there, loved, I don't think so. Lusted after a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. The lords of the Philistines came up unto her and said, "Entice him, see wherein his great strength lieth, by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and we'll give thee every one of us 1,100 pieces of silver." Now it doesn't say how many lords there are. It is plural. So we know it's at least 2,200 pieces of silver. Probably quite a bit more, because I'm not thinking 2 people are going to try to get Samson. I'm thinking more like 5 or 6. And each one of them, 1,100 pieces of silver. How much money does it take to buy someone? Well, she jumped right on this. Oh, okay. So subtle when she deals with Samson, verse 6. Samson said to Delilah, "Tell me, I pray you, wherein your great strength lieth, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee." Just as subtle as can be, right? No. Why don't you just tell me how we can beat you? How we can just destroy you? Shouldn't a little flicker of recognition go on here in his mind? I don't think she's on my side. Maybe she's not out in my best interest. It doesn't seem to afflict me. He plays with it, doesn't he? He said, well, here's what you do. He says, verse 7, if it bind me with 7 green withs that never dried, take some vines, just wrap them around me. If they're green, I can't break them. Then you got me. So they did it. That should be the second thing. She did what he said to do. But it goes right over his head. Oh, I'm just going to play with this. Verse 8, the lords of the Philistines brought up the things. In verse 9, there were men lying in wait, abiding in the chambers. She said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. He brake the withs as a thread of tow is broken when it touches the fire. Breaks off. Come on, come and get me. You're fine. We'll just let you go. So his strength was not known. Notice verse 10, though. Delilah said unto Sam, behold, you have mocked me, told me lies. Now tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. She does this every time from here on out. If you look at it, verse 15, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You've mocked me these 3 times. When was the other one? Verse 13. Hitherto you've mocked me and told me lies. Tell me where you may be. She's not pulling any punches. I want to destroy you, Samson. How can I do it? And he keeps with her. He should have run. It's like Adam and Eve in the garden. They should have slapped that snake and got out of there. No, we're just going to play around with it. We'll see how close we can get to sin without really doing anything. And it's blinding to him, isn't it? Well, we all know the story. Verse 16, it came to pass when she pressed him daily with her words. Reminds me of the story of Joseph and Potiphar's wife. She tempted him daily. You know, it isn't enough just to resist temptation once. Yes, all right, I won. Guess what? Comes right back the next day. Isn't that why Christ said, or Paul said, I die daily? Jesus said, take up your cross daily and follow me. Pressed him daily with the words and urged him so that his soul was vexed unto death. There was a fight. I shouldn't tell her, but I really like this girl. I mean, she's nice. She's not really going to do anything. And you know what? I've already broken the one vow, or then maybe the second vow. What's this going to matter if I cut my hair? I don't know if that's his thinking, or if he's thinking at all. It doesn't look like he's thinking at all, does it? Verse 17, he told her all his heart, said unto her, there hath not come a razor upon my head, for I've been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart. She sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, which were probably getting pretty leery about this by now. No, I'm not coming up there again unless you know for sure. But they did. Come up this once. He showed me all his heart. They brought the money this time. Brought the money in their hand, and she made him sleep upon her knees. She called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. She began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. She said, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. He awoke out of his sleep and said, I'll go out as other times before and shake myself. And one of the saddest sentences in the Bible, he wished or knew not that the Lord was departed from him. He didn't even know. He had put the final straw on the camel's back. He had long before lost that commitment, the 4th one, as he's dealing with harlots and Delilah herself. So this is the last straw. And he doesn't even know. He thinks, I can handle this. I can do it. He begins to depend on himself, doesn't he? But, verse 21, the Philistines took him, put out his eyes, brought him down to Gaza, bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. The good sermon outline, sin blinds, sin binds, and sin grinds. Okay, that's what it does. They put out his eyes, and they bound him with fetters, and he had to grind in round and round, pushing that millstone, grinding the wheat or whatever it was for these people, for the enemy. A bit of foreshadowing in verse 22, howbeit the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. We'll come back to that. But I want us to notice verse 23, then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon their god, and to rejoice, for they said, our God hath delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands. When the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God hath delivered into our hands our enemy, the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. Interesting that God's enemies rejoice at the fall of one of God's children. Sad thing. Came to pass when their hearts were merry, they said, call for Samson, you may make us sport. They called for Samson out of the prison house, and he made them sport. Just making fun here. They set him between the pillars. Samson said unto the lad that held him by the hands, suffer me, may feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I may lean upon them. Now the house was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there. Upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson made sport. This is a big shindig that they're watching. Samson makes sport. Samson called unto the Lord. How many times have we seen Samson pray? This is only the second time, and only 2 times in the whole scripture that we see him praying. First time was when he was about to die of thirst, he thought, after killing those 1,000 men, and now he's praying in a desperate time. And what does he want? Avenged. O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee. Strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged. I want revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars upon which the house stood, which it was borne up, one with his right hand, the other with his left. Now you've probably all pictured this or seen movies or even, what do you call those, felt things that you saw in Sunday school where they put up the felt pictures. Flannel graph, that's the word I was looking for. I don't know whether he pushed on him or pulled on him, whatever, but he somehow got a hold of him and bowed himself, and everything comes down. I can imagine that little lad that just took him there, and he sees it beginning to crumble. He's trying to hightail it out of there. This doesn't look good. I'm out of here. Everybody else is up there drinking and having a good time. Oh, there's Samson down there. Look at him, look at him. And Samson's, it all starts to crumble and crack and fall. Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. He bowed himself with all his might. The house fell upon the lords, upon the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which slew in his life. And the end of verse 31, he judged Israel 20 years. Now, I'd like you, if you do take notes, please write some of these things down. These are some practical lessons we can learn from Samson. First one that I put down is flippancy with spiritual matters results in disaster. Flippancy. Who can tell me what flippancy is? If someone's flippant, they're what? Careless. Who cares? Flippant. It doesn't mean anything. Flippancy with spiritual matters results in disaster. If it isn't serious to you to serve the Lord, like Joshua says, choose you this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods on the other side of the flood, the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell, but as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Can't be flippant with that. It results in disaster. That's a clear lesson. Number 2, compromise has a snowballing effect. Compromise has a snowballing effect. Now you get a lot of snow up here, as we do. If you take a snowball, small one, and you get on an incline and you start pushing, and it gets bigger and bigger, doesn't it? And as it picks up snow, that's what a snowballing effect is. It just gets bigger and bigger, and eventually it'll just crumble under its own weight, usually, unless it hits something and breaks it. But compromise, giving up your standards, letting things slip, it has a snowballing effect. Well, this honey, I mean, look how God provided this honey. I'm not going to tell mom and dad, though, but look how God, and it's good. And it's a marriage. I'm getting married and having, why not have wine? Why not have, everybody else is drinking? But she's a pretty woman. My commitment to God, it'll be all right. The other things, when I'd sinned before, it didn't matter. It's here, last thing. Broke all the other three. What difference is this going to make? It has a snowballing effect. It just gets worse and worse. Number 3, hiding things from those we love backfires. I could probably get testimonies from you when you were young, when you hid things from your parents, and they found out about it. It backfired, didn't it? Yeah, I know it did with me. They'll never find out. Our children, same thing. They'll never find out. Steve Pickett, I don't know if you know evangelist Steve Pickett, tells a story, and he hated liver. And his mom would always make him clean his plate. And he came up with a lot of different solutions to get rid of that liver without eating it. And one of them was, there was a windowsill with a curtain there, and when she went out to the kitchen and wasn't looking, he would take it and put it on the windowsill. And then after supper's all over, he'd go outside, open the window, and give it to the dog. He's happy he didn't have to eat it. Mom's happy it's gone. And the dog's happy because he got some liver. But one day he forgot to take care of the liver and give it to the dog. And he was at school and he remembered, uh-oh. So he goes home real quick and he goes to the windowsill and it's not there. I am toast. But what is there is a plate on the table with the liver that had been there 2 nights before or whatever, and a fork and a chair. Sit down, Steve, you're going to eat this liver. And he had to sit there and eat the whole thing. I guess that's probably worse than eating it the first time. But hiding things from those you love backfires. If you're married, start hiding things from your spouse, you're on a downhill slide. It's not going to work out well. You need to be upfront. Don't hide things. It didn't work for Samson. Here we go, number 4. Flirting with sin is courting calamity. Flirting with sin is courting calamity. Samson just played around with it. I just tie me up with Greene when he puts things in my hair, and just, if I have ropes that have never been used before, he just plays and plays with this, and it ends up in disaster, doesn't it? I have 4 points underneath this. Number 1, we lose clarity of thought. Samson was not thinking. If he had an ounce of sense or at least a little bit of clarity of thought, he said, this woman is not good for me. She's out to get me. Everything I've said, she's done. But we lose clarity of thought when we flirt with sin. Well, it won't happen to me. I know enough to cover my tracks. I can get away with this. That's an age-old lie from Satan. You can't get away with it. The soul, be sure your sin will find you out. Whatsoever man soweth, that shall also reap. We lose clarity of thought. Number 2 under that, our resistance wears down. Satan knows that. Delilah must have knew that. Pressed on him daily. Mocked. You've mocked me, and crying crocodile tears. Oh, Samson, you said you loved me, but you're not even telling me. Right? His resistance begins to wear down. the closer you are to it, the more you flirt with it and play around with it, your resistance wears down. Number 3, we lose sight of the consequences. Do you suppose Samson thought this through? Now here, she's tied me up with the things, tied me up with a rope, she's put these things in my hair. Now if I tell her about this, she'll probably cut my hair. They'll probably come and put my eyes out. I'll probably die. No. Never thought of the consequences, did he? He couldn't have. We lose sight of the consequence. I want to do this because this looks like a good temptation. It pleases me. She pleases me well, right? And we don't think, that's going to turn out bad. It's not going to work out. There's going to be consequences. Well, the 4th one under that, flirting with sin according to calamity, Satan will provide ample opportunities. Satan will provide ample opportunities. And that's why Paul says in Ephesians 4, neither give place to the devil. He's always going to try to get his foot in the door. And he gets his foot in the door, he gets his knee in the door, gets his hip in the door, I'm in. Okay? He's going to give you an opportunity to sin. He's going to present a temptation. Don't let it wear you down. Don't lose clarity of thought. Don't flirt with that. Oh, that's not so bad. I mean, even if it's only going to hurt me, right? No. In fact, one of the next lessons, number 5, I put, sin may cause us to lose what we value the most. Sin may cause us to lose what we value the most. What do you think Samson valued the most, other perhaps than his strength? What did he lose? His eyesight, right? His eyes. What was the main cause of his sin? His lust, his eyes. And God took that through the enemy, of course. But he lost his strength, he lost his eyesight. Sin may cause you to lose what you value the most. If you're familiar with the story of David and Absalom and Joab, Absalom wanted to get back together with King David after he had messed up and gotten away from him, and Joab was trying to intercede there, and he ends up burning down his field to get his attention. And nothing else got his attention until he burned up all his crops. No. You ever have God hit you in the head by 2x4? He's got to get your attention. And sometimes it's the thing that you value the most. Jonathan, you were mentioning about the man that has this problem. Sometimes God uses a very, very severe thing to get your attention. And it may be the thing you value the most. A lot of testimonies from that. Number 6, carelessness in private leads to public disgrace. Carelessness in private leads to public disgrace. Just like David, he's at night on the rooftop. It's private. Everybody else is out to war. He sees the woman, Bathsheba. Carelessness in private leads to public disgrace. Happens in your life, it happens in mine. I think of Daniel. Remember when they gave the decree, no man can worship any other god except the king. No man could pray to any other man except the king. And Daniel, he knew what the decree was, but it says he went out as he had done aforetime. It was his habit. And he prayed to the Lord. If you don't do your homework, you're not going to pass the test when it comes to a public test. Daniel had done his homework. That was his habit, to pray to God. He didn't wait until it was a big, I'm going to show them when these lions are coming, I'll whoop them. No. He had been faithful all along. And when the test came, there's nothing to him. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to. 3 Hebrew children. Whether God delivers us or not, we're not going to bow down to your image. They'd done their homework, and they passed the test. Samson hadn't done his homework. He was careless in his private life, and it led to a public disgrace. What about you? Are you careless in your private life? It can lead to public disgrace. We mentioned this. Number 7, revenge should be left in the hands of God. Isn't that what he says? Vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. Oh, you did this to me, I'm going to do that to you. Every fight, what does the book of Proverbs say? Only by pride cometh contention. You said that about my mama? Well, your mama... And these are your mama jokes, right? We try to get even. We gotta have the last word. If you have children, you know this is the case. They won't fight until they have said the last thing. You may be dragging them out to the bedroom to beat the tar out of them, but he did this or he hit me first. They always got to have the last word. It's revenge. Leave it in the hands of God. It destroyed Samson. Number 8, we never go down alone. We never go down alone. If you were Samson's parents, I don't know how long they lived. I mean, it was only 20 years, so he must have only been a young man. I assume that his parents were still alive. Never thought much about it, but how did they feel about their son? I didn't mention this, but it struck me as I was studying it, chapter 13. Then the angel said, behold, thou shalt conceive and bear a son. Now drink no wine. Even when she just got pregnant, God said, now he's consecrated to me. Now he's his Nazarite. Does that leave room for, well, it's not really a person until it's born. It's just a blob of no. God values human fetus. There's no question there. We never go down alone. We hurt people when we go down. We influence other people. When I was in college, one of my favorite song leaders was a very, I would say, in Christian circles, he was rather famous. His whole family, there was quite a few in the family. But this guy was a tremendous song leader, just full of energy and just seemed to love the Lord. But you know what? My senior year, it came out that he had been involved with one of the students in an illicit affair. And it wasn't even a girl, it was a guy. And it just destroyed me. And so I looked up to this guy. How could he possibly do something like that? And it took a big hit on my faith at that time. And when we fall, when we sin, we don't go down alone. We affect others. And some of them you may not even know are looking at you. Of course, we know our children are watching, but you don't know who else in the church or where you're working. When you go down, you don't go down alone. When Samson went down, he didn't go down alone. He hurt other people, and he influenced other people. All right, number 9. Fallen Christians give the enemy cause for rejoicing. Oh, you'll see it on the news. Such and such televangelist falls into sin. They're gloating over it, aren't they? They love to see Christians fall. What was this Duggar guy? Headlines on Fox News. He didn't act very Christian in this situation. Come on. Fallen Christians give the enemy cause for rejoicing. These people, Dagon delivered Samson. Look what our God did. And they rejoice, having this huge party. It's sad when a believer falls. We shouldn't shoot our wounded, but it should break your heart when God's people fall. Number 10. answered prayer isn't based on what we deserve. God answered Samson's prayer. Every prayer that he prayed, God answered it. Did he deserve it? No. Do you deserve answered prayers? No. We get to thinking that, if I haven't done this temptation, haven't yielded to this for quite a while, and maybe God, now I can pray and God will answer this. And we get this idea that if we're good enough, God will do this. That eliminates a 5-letter word called grace, doesn't it? We're never good enough. We never will be until we're with Christ. It's only his righteousness that's placed to our account. And God doesn't answer prayer based on what we deserve. Don't think, well, I've been living good now, so I should get, God, you owe this to me. God doesn't owe you anything. Number 11, forgiveness is available. And I've got 3 things underneath this. This is a long sermon, isn't it, Justin? Not too bad. I'll get out of here for 12, I think. How long does he always go long? Okay. All right, I feel better. Forgiveness is available. 3 things. Forgiveness is instantaneous. When you pray and ask God to forgive you, he does it now. You don't have to wait until he sees that, well, you really mean it this time. No, forgiveness is instantaneous. But, second thing, restoration is gradual. Restoration is gradual. We said we'd come back to that verse 22 of chapter 16, howbeit the hair of his head began to grow again. You know what? His hair began to grow, but his eyes didn't grow back, did they? No. He didn't get that back. There was usefulness coming back, but it is gradual. We got a barber back here. Hair grows, some people's hair grows faster than, he's got a nice beard, I like that. But my hair, thankfully, it hasn't turned loose yet, it's turned gray. But a lot of it's turning loose. But it's a gradual thing. I look back at our school pictures, and the kids, they laugh. Mr. Greene, you had hair. It wasn't gray. But restoration is gradual. It takes time to restore that trust. If you've messed up in your faithfulness with your mate, that trust factor that's been broken is not going to immediately, oh, well, he said he's sorry. That's good. It's going to be a gradual thing to get that back. If you've messed up in the church, people aren't automatically going to trust you because you said you've got it right with God. Restoration's gradual. Oh, you're forgiven. If you've confessed it and you got it right with God, it's forgiven. Particularly with people, they don't forgive so easily. They don't forget so easily. And the third one under forgiveness is consequences aren't erased. Consequences aren't erased. He didn't grow back his eyes. He never got to see again. Even though he got his strength back for that one final thing, and got his hair grow back. Why didn't the Philistines think about that? His hair's growing back. I better keep a close shave on this guy, right? But the consequences aren't erased. My former pastor, when I was growing up, used to give the illustration in Vacation Bible School. He'd bring a board in, and he would take a hammer and nail, and he'd pound nails in different spots, different size nails, and say, these nails represent sins in our life, and maybe just a little finishing nail, and then here's a spike as a big sin. And he says, God can forgive them. And he'd take the hammer and pull those nails out. But guess what? Still in those boards, there's scars, there's holes. Sin has consequences. It's going to scar. You can't erase that. People are always going to say, remember what he did? Remember her? She did. They're not going to forgive. I remember my dad, before he was saved, he was not a good guy. And he had a reputation. And after he got saved, we were out visiting, and we went to this one home, and they said, Bob Greene goes to your church? I'm not going to go there. And he'd been saved for years at that point, but his reputation from years before he was saved led to this woman, no way. I'm not going to your church if he goes there. He's a completely changed man at that point, but didn't matter to her. There are consequences. They're not erased. Last point. Here you go, Pastor. And it's only 11:50. Restored usefulness is not only possible, but expected. Restored usefulness is not only possible, but is expected. Samson's main ministry in his life was to begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. He did that. He began to deliver them. He didn't finish it, but he did begin. He was used, even in his death, he killed more than in his life. And he killed a lot of them in his life. But I want you to think, go back to John chapter 20. Remember in chapter 18, Jesus is going to the cross and Peter denies him 3 times, doesn't he? Oh, you were with him? No, not me. Weren't you one of the? Yeah, you're one of the disciples. No, not me. I got the wrong guy. And the last person says, yeah, your speech betrays you. So he begins to curse. And swear, well, that'll change it. Right. I didn't even know the man. And Jesus, looks at him. And he goes out and weeps bitterly. It's over. And in chapter 20, I think one of the first verse, I'm going back to fishing. I go fishing. Well, guess who's there already on the shore with the fish that he couldn't catch, already cooked. Hey, come and dine. And he jumps overboard, naked, jumps in the water and swims to shore. And what does Christ do? Peter, do you love me? How many times did he say that? 3 times, right? How many times did he deny him? Do you love me? Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Usefulness should be restored. When you sin, it's not the end of the world. If you repent and get it right with God, God can use you again. There may be some areas where you can't be used again, but that's God's an awesome God. He can use you in ways you can't imagine. And Peter thought he was done. Man, I betrayed him. I boasted on how good I was. I would never turn my back on him, and that's the very thing I did. He felt so low. And Jesus said, I still got a job for you. You feed my sheep. We got to restore your usefulness. It's not only possible, it's expected. Don't use the excuse, well, I messed up and I can't be used for God anymore. No, God expects you. Get it right. Get back working for him. Now, as we close, where are you today? Are you young, strong with life before you? Samson starts out his life. Man, what potential. I mean, from his mother's womb, this guy and the Spirit of the Lord begins to work in him mightily. What potential. Refuse to yield. Refuse to compromise. You've got your life before. Amazing what God could do with you. But possibly you're in the midst, number 2, of compromise. You've already touched the dead animal. You've already hidden things from those you love. You've already messed up. Here's what I'd say to you. Get off that slippery slope. Remember, it's just going to head downhill. You've got to stop. It was what God told Joshua when Achan had sinned. Get up off your face. There's sin in the camp. Deal with it. Don't lay there crying about it. Get up and do something. Get off that slippery slope. So you messed up. Peter did. And anybody in Scripture, some of them aren't recorded for us, but most of the characters in Scripture, they messed up, but God still used them. And thirdly, if you're in the aftermath of a fall, don't give up. Don't think that God's done with you. I can't be used of God. Don't give up. God can still restore the years the locusts have eaten, as he says.